Imagine a world where music isn't just entertainment, but real magic. What if I told you that some musicians make deals with dark forces to create their masterpieces? The musician's spell is not just a myth, but a story full of mystery and intrigue. Today, we will dive into this fascinating world, uncover the secrets of great composers, and find out what price they paid for their genius. Are you ready to open the veil of secrets? Let's begin our journey. 6 boys were playing explorers in an abandoned building. The house should have been demolished long ago, but by some strange coincidence, the city authorities had forgotten about it. Homeless people and other subjects not too burdened with moral principles often slept here. The police raided the place a couple of times, thus discouraging the homeless from living there. Although the locked door didn't stop anyone in the bitter cold. In the spring, the house was empty, its inhabitants scattered around the city until the next cold weather. That's why the boys bravely walked around the floors of the empty house, looked into the apartments in the hope of finding something interesting. Suddenly, on the ground floor, there was a noise, and then the boys heard music. The melody poured down the floors, mesmerizing and beckoning. Without collusion, the boys went down to the first floor, wanting to see the musician. But there was no one on the first floor, yet the melody continued to sound. The 5 of them left the building and walked towards the sound, not paying attention to the people around them. The 5 boys, one by one, disappeared into a dense grove near the abandoned house. They have not been seen since. Galina, hi, did your Semka come home? An anxious mother searched her friends for her son. Hey Zoe, no, I thought he was with yours. Weren't they going to your place? Galina was surprised. No, they didn't come. Pedika is going to look for them, and if he finds them, he'll take them out, Galina said tearfully. Semyon and Sasha were friends. They went to the same kindergarten group and got into the same class. They were friends and hooligans together, and then they served their sentences only separately. Now it was spring break. A lot of fun for the boys. You don't have to go to school, you don't have to learn lessons either. Your parents are at work 24 hours a day. You don't have time for them. So the friends were having a good time. They were street kids, they had little interest in gadgets, and they didn't have any. The families were the simplest, the ones that survive on small salaries. Galina worked as a saleswoman in a chain store, and when she came home, most of the time she wanted to lie silently and not move. But she had a family, a son, and a husband. The relationship with her husband had long since broken down, and they lived together for a simple reason. There was nowhere to go. Igor, the father and husband of the family, worked as a loader and liked to drink foam from Friday to Sunday. There was never any extra money in the house, and Sashka dreamed that when he grew up, he would earn a lot and they would have everything. Zoya, her husband and son lived in a rented apartment, as their own 2-bedroom in the bedroom district was burned down by the father of the family. It wasn't that Petya was a heavy drinker, he just couldn't stop. That day he fell asleep with a cigarette, and here's the result. He was rescued, but the apartment was a flop and debts to the neighbors. Now Peter's in grief and he's drowning it, understandably. Galina and Zoya went to look for their sons themselves to give them a good beating. No, they were not worried about the boys, but about if they would be caught by the police at a late hour. The women were so tired of everyday life and the constant problems of life that they became unemotional with their loved ones. After walking around the neighborhood, the women did not find their children. They returned home, and only after midnight went to the police, where they met 3 more acquaintances, all of them missing children. This is the first time that 5 people disappeared in one day, was surprised by the duty officer at the police station. It's even a bit uncomfortable. The search began immediately. The case was entrusted to Anna Fedorova. She had experience in the search for lost children. But the main thing was that everyone understood the importance of the case, and the fact that almost certainly the guys would not be found. A cardboard box full of thin folders was rattling on the table. Here, these are for the last 7 years and 2 more are coming in now. The cases are not closed, the manhunt is ongoing, said Investigator Ignatov. Continues? Anna grinned. Are you serious? Judging by the layer of dust on the folders, they have not been touched for many months. Oh, come on. They're not the first, and I don't think they'll be the last. What do you mean? Read the files. The woman took the advice, delved into the reading. She had a habit, when she was pensive or nervous, of doodling aimlessly in her notebook. Sometimes it was useful. So, in the last 10 years, Children have been missing frequently in the city and in the region in general. The ages vary, but all are minors. Families are also the same in terms of wealth. They didn't have a lot of money, they survived as best they could. Almost all families had problems, but no one was registered, so they were still holding on. The feedback about the children was mostly positive. Teachers noticed that the children were not stupid, but no one was busy with them. Parents are busy with themselves, fed, clothed, shoe, it's already good. The places of disappearance and circumstances were different, but there was one thing in common. Witnesses said that the children seemed to be listening to something, and their eyes were glassy. The kids were like they were mesmerized, but adults did not react in any way to the strange behavior of the child. For example, one boy suddenly rushed across the road and hid in the bushes, but no one reacted. One of the witnesses remembered about it only a week after the disappearance of the child. "I saw him running across the road as if someone had called him. I wanted to scold him, saying he shouldn't run across the road, but for some reason I didn't. It's like a blackout. I thought I saw it, but I didn't do anything. It felt strange, like I was hungover the next day," the witness later recounted. The more Anna dug into the files, the more frightened she became. None of the long list had been found dead or alive. It was as if the children had vanished into thin air. It doesn't work like that. That it's a kidnapping is clear enough, but why? It's not a baby or a toddler to be sold to a childless family. It's not an option for something worse, because everyone's hereditary and no one's gonna do expensive tests. Caught in a crime? Well, not all at once, right? The story was getting weirder and weirder. The investigator decided to focus on the latest case of 5 missing boys. All 5 lived in the same neighborhood, went to the same school, and often walked together. The parents knew each other due to different circumstances. The boys disappeared during spring break. None of them returned home after the walk. Anna noticed a pinned piece of paper. There was a 6th boy. What? Soon she learned that on that ill-fated day in the abandoned house played 6 children. She hadn't been given the case from the start, and that made her angry. The testimony is some confused and unclear. It is necessary to interview the boy. A boy named Edik lived in the same yard as the missing Sashka. In the apartment where she was allowed, was clean, cozy, and smelled of cinnamon. Anna immediately noticed the fresh renovation, expensive appliances. There were clearly no financial problems here. "Let's go into the kitchen," a well-groomed woman of 45 invited her, who introduced herself as Mila, Edik's mother. "Before we talk to Edik, tell me about my son." Mila was silent for a while and then spoke. "The story is a simple one, common at all times. She gave birth to Edik from a married rich man who had been promising to divorce for 5 years. His son was his only son, so he spared no expense." Mila later guessed that the wife apparently tied the man something very strong, much stronger than the bonds of marriage. Edik grew up smart and cheerful boy, moderately curious, a little hooliganism, but that's what he is, a boy. Despite the financial security, Edik was not an upstart. He had a lot of friends. He did. 2 years ago, when he was 9, he caught a cold. At first Mila didn't worry about the usual sniffles, but the situation worsened by the hour. When the ambulance brought the boy to the hospital, he was unconscious. High temperature, fever, and no one could help him. The child was put into a medically induced coma and advised to pray. 3 days later he woke up, but there was one thing: the boy was almost completely deaf. Mila did not tell about the treatment and rehabilitation, but only said that her son has an implant that allows him to hear. The implant is controlled by a bracelet and is switched off when necessary. At such times, Edik cannot hear anything. As a consequence, the child has speech problems. At first, Edik was afraid to meet old friends, but to his surprise, everything was fine. His friends accepted him as he was. "Hi, my name is Anna." The investigator entered the boy's room with his mother. The child was sitting at the computer and playing a game, not paying attention to those who entered. "Did you come to talk about my friends?" Edik's voice sounded muffled. He stretched his words a little. "Yes, just to talk." Mila left the room, closing the door. Every day she thanked the higher powers that her boy was alive and near. "Tell me in order from the very morning what happened that day, even the smallest details you can remember," Anna asked. "Do you think they are still alive?" The boy stared at the investigator. "I hope so, and you can help me with that." That day, Edik woke up early despite the vacation. Mom was gone to work. The boy heated up a sandwich in the microwave. After breakfast, he wanted to sit down at the computer to play as the doorbell rang. Looking at the video intercom, Edik was glad. On the doorstep stood Sashka with Vadik, his friends. "Let's go outside. It's cold out there, why don't we play at my house?" The boys wanted to agree but shook their heads negatively. No, the boys are already waiting there. We'll explore the abandoned house, announced Sashka. He was the leader of all the games. Half an hour later, the three stood under a sprawling maple tree, which had released its first buds. Spring was coming into its rights, not in a hurry, but in the air already felt a special smell of freedom. Edik, Sashka, Vadim, Semyon, Tolik, and Misha entered the abandoned building. The game of Explorer turned out to be interesting. In some apartments it was still possible to find some things, thinking themselves cool scientists. The boys searched the whole house, including the basement. On the second floor, and the house itself was 3 stories, the young explorers went to their apartments. Edik was with Sashka. Suddenly, Edik heard a growing rumble in his head. The sound pressed on his ears, a terrible headache. The boy, almost blinded from the pain, fell to the floor, shrunk into a lump. Sashka was confused, and suddenly he froze, listened, his eyes glazed over. The boy silently stepped over his friend and left the room. Edik managed to disconnect the implant and was left in complete silence. Somehow getting up, he walked to the window and saw his friends walking towards the grove. He was confused by their gait, as if their legs were tied at the knees and pulled by a rope. His head ached again and the boy barely made it out of the building and went home. He didn't realize that he had seen his friends last, and another thing he remembered was that Sasha acted like he was listening to music. Anna stepped out of the entryway and inhaled a full breath. It seemed to her that the boy had said everything in the conversation. There was something else. It was time to go home. She lived in a new house almost on the outskirts of the city. At the stage of excavation, she bought an inexpensive Evrodvushka on a mortgage where she lived alone. Her parents had long since passed away, and she had no other relatives. After a shower and a snack, she dug back into her notes. Memories from her childhood came flooding back to her. When she was about 10 years old, a girl, Maya, had joined their class. At first glance, the children had determined that she was clearly from a dysfunctional family, but no one had mocked her. Rather, they pitied her. Because half of the class was like that. Anna was also the daughter of alcoholics. Sometimes her mother didn't cook for weeks, and the apartment looked like a barn. Little Anya was sometimes afraid to go home because her mother's friends were there. At the age of 9, the girl knew how to fight back and fight back. In fact, the mother drank herself to sleep after the death of Anya's father, unable to stand. The only person who cared about the girl was her grandmother. Her grandmother loved and spoiled her, and after the death of her mother took her to herself. It was her grandmother who insisted on a law school. She herself worked as a judge for many years. To remember about childhood Anna did not like, but she did not consider herself unhappy. One day the same Maya did not come to school. No one got excited, did not look for her. Only a week later the class teacher sent Anya with another girl to find out what's up. As it turned out, Maya disappeared a week ago. The police were not immediately informed. She was never found. Maya as if vanished into thin air. Anna didn't notice how she dozed off on the sofa. She dreamed of a forest, thick and dark. She walked barefoot, feeling small needles digging into the soles of her feet. She heard music, the magical melody of a flute calling to her. She listened mesmerized and walked on. There she is in a strange place, drops of water dripping from the ceiling. It is a cave. A dim light comes from a smoldering fire. Someone is sitting there. Anna slowly approaches and sees that a girl is sitting on the ground with her head bowed low, and behind her stands someone wrapped in a cloak. A bony hand with long claws is clutching the child's shoulder. Suddenly the girl raises her head sharply. It's Maya. Pale skin, you can see blue veins and white eyes as if draped with thighs. With horror, Anya screamed. She was snapped out of her nightmare by the ringing of the phone. Someone insistently wanted to talk to her. An unknown number glowed on the display. "Hello!" Anna said sharply. "Anna? Good night, I apologize for the late call. Who are you? I teach history of religions and philosophy. You're looking for a maniac who kidnaps children, aren't you? How do you know? You see, I've worked with your colleagues before. Ask Ivan Alexandrov about me. Your name? Sergei Anatolievich Witherman. Uh-huh. And what do you want? What do you want? Why are you calling at night? It's just that I often work at night, and now, when I found the information, I didn't look at my watch and called you. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Not over the phone. Come by in the morning." He dictated an address and hung up. Intrigued, Anna checked in the program. This man, the truth said, really exists. A little later she contacted a colleague who gave details about the professor, after which she went to the meeting, not holding out much hope. The professor was unexpectedly a rather young man, a little carelessly dressed with 3-day stubble. He led her to a dark, dusty office littered with racks of books. Once there was a rat infestation in a German town. The people of the town fought the rats in every way they could, but the rats just kept getting bigger. Soon the rats began to attack people, especially children and old people. Then the head of the city promised a high reward to the one who would rid the city of rats. Soon such a daredevil appeared, a young man with a flute. The musician played a magic tune and lured all the rats out of the city by drowning them in the river. Then the head of the town felt sorry for the money and rudely refused the musician. He grinned unkindly and left. A couple of days later, in front of the adults who were paralyzed and unable to move, the musician took away all the children of the town. He did the same as he had done with the rats. Unprecedented grief struck the town. Parents rushed to look for the musician, but he seemed to disappear into thin air. Then they began to talk about the unclean, the demon who takes away children. So the legend of the musician stealing children was born. Over many hundreds of years, the legend has changed and grown in detail. The hunters of evil, or the Holy Inquisition, have been tracking strange cases of missing children for decades. There was such a hunter named Adrian. Later he became the Grand Inquisitor, so he got close to the monster. It was the 16th century in the Spanish countryside. Adrian was passing through those parts, and in conversation he learned that they were missing children, and before that, 3 had gone missing in a neighboring village. They try to protect the children as the apple of their eye, but alas, 2 have already disappeared. The hunter got interested, asked around, and decided to stay. One night he shared a room with a boy of 7. The hospitable host had fed his guest from scratch, and now he could not sleep. Adrian saw the boy awake and listening to something. Then he deftly jumped out of the window, which was open, although the man had locked it himself. The future inquisitor rushed after him. The boy, as mesmerized, walked along the road in the direction of the forest. Strictly speaking, it was a small mountain covered with dense forest, and there was a deep cave, rumored to be inhabited by demons. The boy reached the cave and disappeared into the darkness. Adrian followed him until he lost the trail. And then he felt it. The air was like jelly, thick and damp, and the unpleasant odor of decay penetrated his nostrils, giving him a headache and nausea. Adrian stumbled on cotton legs and nearly fell, tripping over something on the cave floor. Lowering his gaze, the man froze in shock. There was a child lying on the floor, but it was a different boy. The body was practically mummified, as if it had been here for years. He soon realized this was a mass grave. All the missing children over the years were here. Save and preserve. God. Adrian was so shocked that he didn't notice the movement behind him. The same boy with the crazy eyes kicked the hunter's legs. He fell with a scream and froze again. In the corner of the cave stood a monster. A humanoid creature with a creepy face and burning eyes. It reeked of death. Adrian was scared out of his wits. It was one thing to catch maidens allegedly for witchcraft, and another to come face to face with this evil thing. But still he was not timid. He lunged at the monster with his sword, felt the blade go in easily. There was a howl that made his ears pop and his blood run cold, and the next moment he felt his insides freeze, his heart slowing its rhythm, and his consciousness leaving him. Before he blacked out, Adrian remembered the monster's appearance. He was not found until morning, not far from the entrance to the cave. He did not remember how he had got there, but he was already in a state of forgetfulness, for he had a serious wound on his stomach. The doctor later said that it was as if he had been cut open and his insides were being ripped out. Fortunately, the monster didn't finish the job, and Adrian and the boy survived. The boy didn't remember anything at all, just a beautiful melody. Adrian took a long time to recover, then he wrote down the story in detail, along with his findings, and sent it to his superiors. That's when it was revealed that the church had been hunting this monster for years, but no one had ever gotten as close as Adrian, and yes, it was a secret case. Since then, Adrian has been hunting this monster he nicknamed the Dark Musician. He has mapped out the locations of child abductions, his observations on what drives the monster and how to defeat it. You can't defeat it, it's an ancient evil. All children have the same trait. They are from dysfunctional families where there is abuse, drunkenness, and other sins. Even if it looks like a decent family behind closed doors, it's different. So they're unhappy kids? No one wants them? Anna stared at the professor. You could say that. Tales and legends about the rat catcher in different regions sound differently, but the essence is the same. The demon takes away children that no one wants, and there's plenty of evidence of that. By the way, Have you ever wondered why some children are never found, and others are found even after a long time? It's not about the professionalism of the authorities or volunteers. It's about the children themselves. The man took off his glasses and began to wipe them thoroughly. I get it. Do you really believe in a monster? Do you? You don't yet? Well, not all children of drunkards and debauchees disappear, Anna objected. Right, only those who heard his call, nodded the professor. I wish I could be of more help. Anna said goodbye and left a little disappointed. She had hoped for more substantial help, and she had just been told medieval tales, though he printed out his notes and a map showing similar disappearances in our country. In her office, Anna laid out her notes and the sheets of printed map and thought. She saw something familiar in the arrangement of these dots. Armed with a ruler and a pencil, she connected the dots and gradually the picture became visible. All the disappearances in the region had happened around the same place, the Misty Forest. It was nicknamed Misty Forest long ago, for the fact that fog often appears there regardless of the weather. Even ufologists came there and said that the place was anomalous and unclean. The forest is spread over a large area. There are several recreation centers, but in general in the thicket, no one goes. This forest does not have a good reputation. It is easy to get lost there, drown in a swamp or fall into a sinkhole, which there are many. The forest grows at the foot of a mountain where radioactive minerals were once mined. There's no telling what kind of monster might have grown there. Before she went exploring, she wrote a long text message to her co-worker who had been on the case before and was in the know. Plus, she had time to share her thoughts about the maniac with him. Anna was almost certain that a sophisticated maniac had been operating in their region for years. She wasn't going to get into a fight with anyone, just a reconnaissance to confirm or deny her hunches. She knew the way, having gone to one of the recreation centers with her friends. Anna arranged for the local forester to help, to guide her to the cave. At first he refused. He said there was nothing there, you cannot go. Dangerous. But Anna had a special gift of persuasion. Maxim, that was the man's name, was waiting for her in the parking lot. In 10 minutes they were already walking through the forest. The forester did not turn around once, walked in silence and showed with all his appearance how unpleasant she was to him.